Right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's session, hosted by the African PhD Scholars Network. Thank you very much for joining us today. And today we're beginning a series on artificial intelligence in higher education. My name is Dr. Genevieve Bosah. I'm the convener. And I'm here with wonderful guests that will be talking about, this topic together. But before I introduce them, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. And if you're watching this later, thank you. It's still your time. But if you're here in person, do put something in the chat. Tell us where you were joining from and, why you decided to participate in the talk today. We will have time for questions. Absolutely. It's always a conversation where we gather and we share. Now, about the African PhD Scholars Network, if this is your first time, it's a space where it's a community where we share, we collaborate, we talk, and we can also signpost you to different resources. So if this is your first time, welcome. You can find us on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and you can send us an email if you have questions. Now, over the past year, we've been having different conversations. We've had a research culture conference at the University of Hertfordshire, and we're excited to announce that the next one will be in July. So do stay tuned for more, where we talk in depth about doing a PhD and the benefits. Now, that's not the conversation for today. Today, we are looking at all things AI. Let us talk AI. With me today to discuss all of these, I have with me colleagues from higher education here in the UK. And it's always a pleasure when we gather and we talk and we share our very different opinions, albeit controversial at times, but very, very interesting. So I would just bring them up as we begin because we need some time to dive right into it. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Adeyinka Adewale. He's an associate professor at the University of Reading, and he's here today to share with us about artificial intelligence, his experience so far, and we'll have some different segments where we'll talk about this. Also on the call today, we have Dr. Emmanuel Mogaji. Dr. Emmanuel Mogaji is an associate professor, there's something happening in the house, associate professor at Keele University. And it's a pleasure to have him here today. Dr. Emmanuel, wait, smile. Okay. He's not smiling. And of course, we have with us today Dr. Kingsley. Dr. Kingsley is a senior lecturer. We saw it. We saw the celebration. Of course, I was not going to miss it. He's a senior lecturer at Sheffield, Hallam University. Congratulations. Yeah. Yes, we saw the announcement. And I think I said congrats, but I was just going to wait until I said it here. So thank you for those that have put in things in the chat. I will pick them up as we go. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this discussion on artificial intelligence and its growing influence or impact in higher education. Today, we'll be exploring the world of AI in academia. We'll look at its potential to revolutionize teaching, learning, and research. Now, I want us to talk about some of the key takeaways that you would likely take from this session. We'll be exploring impact and opportunities that AI presents, so we'll have conversations around those. Would also acknowledge, and with me on the call and the panelists would acknowledge the challenges and the ethical considerations that come with its application and implementation, because that's one place where most people get, it's a bit sticky. Now, as we proceed today, and we will spend about an hour, 30 minutes or 45, max just to talk, and we'll be very clear. We would also look at future trends, how AI is shaping the field, shaping the graduates, shaping students. And we'll also look at research and collaboration because the world, the graduate pool now is changing with the way people use AI and how you will go out into the workplace. If we have time, we'll touch policy, but policy might be for a different cadre of people. So we'll see how we do with that. Now, let's kick things off. Let me just go to some of the comments as we begin. Some of the commenters have said they want to utilize AI effectively and ethically. Thank you. That's from Ahuna. Favor Ben, I wonder if using AI can ever be ethically accepted in academia. Wait, we are coming. Dr. Emmanuel posted in the chat, recognizing the ever-presence of AI. Okay, yes. Peter, the discussion on AI is an ongoing conversation. It's an area we really need to explore its ups and downs. And yes, indeed. Now, let us begin with the positives, impact and opportunity. How I will start, I'll throw this question. I'll start with you, Dr. Adeyinka. Let's look at the higher education and let's see how we have integrated, what are some of the impacts and opportunities that AI is presenting in higher education?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Genevieve, for convening this very important platform, and thanks for the kind invite. And good afternoon to everyone joining in to listening to what I believe will be an afternoon of very insightful discourse on a very topical issue that we are all grappling with. Let me begin by highlighting the fact that whenever you have a disruptive technology or a disruptive innovation, all through history, we've always had moments where we struggle with how that new technology fits into our reality. And I think the most recent of these will probably be some of the social media platforms when they sort of began to take full footing in our society, and how we began to come to terms with the fact that we may never really experience full privacy again. And we're dealing with the realities that our privacy is under threat consistently and constantly. But now in academia, and even beyond academia, in the general world of work, we now have this GATE, as we call it, the generative artificial intelligence tools, sort of taking center stage. Interestingly, my experience of GATE tools, depending on the spectrum with which you look at it, I've been a part of this for a while. And I've used AI tools in different shapes and forms. I mean, many of us use the autocorrect feature, for instance, on Microsoft Word. That's an AI tool. We use other small features, minor features on different softwares and other platforms that help us sort of make work a lot easier. These are all AI tools. I guess what we're really struggling with might be some of the more sophisticated and the advanced Gen AI tools that we're seeing in our world today. So to your question, Dr. Genevieve, around the positives and some of the nice things we see about AI, I believe it's the fact that it really does make bring a lot of ease and convenience to some of the processes that we would typically engage in. I'll give an example. I mean, if I'm writing a 10,000 word document, or you're doing a PhD with a 90,000 word document in there, would you rather, I mean, of course, I subscribe to you reading your thing over and over again and doing it, but of course, you're still human and you're still prone to some errors and overlooking some of the mistakes that may be in there. And if you have a tool that can comb through your 90,000 word document and help you highlight places where you may want to think about sentence reconstruction, like Grammarly would, or help you look at how you're communicating your thoughts and things of that nature, I believe it's a very welcomed addition to what we're doing. But remember, the way I've put the order, you wrote the work and then you're asking the tool to help you check it out. We can talk more about whether the tool can be involved in the writing process itself. I believe we'll get to that at some point further down the line. Also, some of the more in academia, particularly with some of my students and some of the work I've done with assessments with AI tools, it has the ability to provide this sort of what I call a broad perspective to issues. I give an example. You're dealing with a very complex phenomena where you really are trying to come into an entry level sort of understanding of that issue. A Gen AI tool could provide a summary of some of the prevalent thoughts and perspectives on that issue, providing that first level entry point knowledge base. It's almost like watching a YouTube video that summarizes a concept, but you're just reading the text in a way. That also it's also useful. I mean, I would love that for a device that could help us achieve that. There are many other ways AI tools are quite beneficial, either in using them to find sources, to explain ideas to students who don't understand, to help with writing structure, the use of language, to help improve your work. These are all different levels. In my university, we call those category 2 usage of AI. And we consider that to be perfectly legal, and we don't have any problems with you doing that. And so in a nutshell, Dr. Genevieve, I think that let's agree, AI is here to stay. How we then engage with it is what matters. But in terms of its positives, there are so many benefits, so many positives. I've just highlighted some of them. And these, I believe, can really bring that enhancement that I believe it has a capability of bringing to our work to improve the quality of our outputs in total, in general. Thanks.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is indeed here to stay. And you did mention the ideation process that it helps with the students. So, okay. Now let's continue. Dr. Emmanuel, what would you say in your opinion as some of the positives now also related to maybe, let's say, accessibility? Because I know you write a lot on accessibility, but from a transport perspective, but looking at AI, how would you connect that with higher education? No, we did that during the pandemic. It's
Yeah. And we want to continue where Dr. Adeyinka really stopped, because we need to be clear and mindful that, yes, AI has been a part of our everyday life. And when I saw the title of the presentation, we didn't say generative AI. So we want to go back to the basic. I guess it's left for you to help us know where we want to drive this conversation. Like, you want to take us to a place we want to go. So are we talking about the basic AI, or we are really talking about the generative AI? So when we're talking, so let's just talk about AI generally. I think, like I said, even the normal autocorrect is there. So in terms of the advantages, yes, we recognize it's there, and that is why we recognize the progress that this generative AI has been able to offer. Because like any other technology, if it was not doing well, we won't be able to give you 2.0. We won't be able to give you the updated version. So in terms of accessibility, it helps. From my experience and from my own interaction with students, I think it helps streamline the vast knowledge that is out there. That is something I found that, yes, my students are benefiting from. So imagine you've got a lot of things to read, and it can help you to really streamline it. And also thinking about people with disability, in terms of learning disability, this is also something that becomes very advantageous in terms of how it streamlines the information out there, making it accessible for them. And also, we want to recognize that maybe disability is for some people, it's not permanent. So the fact that you are not just able to attend a class because you've got an headache, that could be an issue of vulnerability. But with technology, again, even recording the lecture, transcribing the text of the recording. So sometimes you don't just want to listen to what everybody has been saying. You just want to read the transcript, which helps you to really understand what is going on. And also, we see the advantage of AI, whereby it helps you to, how would I put this, to review your work. So, for example, I've seen my students tell me they did it. So you want to submit an assignment to Emmanuel. You want to actually run saying, what is the chances of me failing this? So But going back with what Dr. Adeyinka said, this is what you have done, and then you are using this technology to also increase your chances of getting a better mark. So even what you think your friend might not have picked up, this is something that the technology is able to pick up for you. So in terms of education, even also as lecturers, this is something that we also need to recognize in terms of marking. So this is something we've not used it, but I've seen a lot of university talking about it, integrating AI into Turnitin to help you to mark. So though they will tell you you need to read it, but again, you have a system that can also be there to help you. So this is where we need to recognize that sometimes when you are reading 3,000 essay times about 300 students, sometimes your head can be going overdrive. And that is why you might have a technology to assist you. But ultimately, as I round up this point, we want to know our place as human and also the place of AI. So we are not letting the AI take the upper hand. So this is just a tool. I tell people this AI is like fire. You can either use it to cook or use it to burn yourself. So it's left for you to see how you want to use this thing that has been provided for you. You can use it to your advantage, but also you can use it to your own disadvantage. But I guess we are all here in this meeting to recognize that it's important to know it's here to stay and to recognize its advantages and be aware of its dark side and its disadvantages, and also put measures in place to address those dark issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And you want to really take us to the dark side. But just before we go to the dark side, which we will, thank you. Automated grading is one that I know that some people are really fighting, because there are conversations about ungrading, where what's the point of grading? You've taught them and the students can come back, so we can have those conversations. If students do a work and give it to AI and AI checks the work, what is the tutor coming to now say now? Like,
oh, don't say that. Oh, that is
no. Because it's now problematic. This is where we now come into the bias of AI, which is another conversation, the bias of the AI, because it can perpetuate certain biases in the data it is trained in. And then this then comes to job displacement, hold on. Okay, let's pause. Let's pause. Let's continue. So, Dr. Kingsley, in your experience, what are some of the benefits that you have encountered? And I do know that it's a helpful tool and it shouldn't replace human interaction, but we want to hear from you.
Thank you. I think a few things to build on from the previous speaker, the earlier speakers. Dr. Adeyinka spot on talked about the history. We have to realize that what's going on here isn't new. We've had technology integrated into higher education before. The computers that we use now, where if you go to the departments, you see computers everywhere. I have a colleague who was saying to me that when she graduated, they didn't have any computers. And so we're dealing with new students, especially international students, and we're trying to help them sort of get used to the whole computerization of the entire faculty. So again, what I'm trying to say with that is that technology isn't new. So we're just seeing a new iteration. And the question of how we integrate some of these technological tools like AI now is obviously going to be one that it's going to be an ongoing discussion. I think we can all agree that there's some benefits, but I think it's important to also accept that we're still at the very early stages of this phenomena. We're still at the very early stage. So we don't really even know what it will really be in the next few years. Okay. The next thing I want to say in terms of how beneficial it is, first, I want to put this in proper context. The context here is that we are African PhD students. And there's often that discussion about, and you see people talk about the democratization. For some people who are first-class material, they might not necessarily need AI, but there are people who come from backgrounds, and I think Emmanuel highlighted this, with learning difficulties, etc., who will find this tool incredibly useful. So there's that discussion as to AI can bring everybody to a certain point. I think that's one of the big advantages. In my own practice, and I think Dr. Adeyinka was saying this before we started, we've had to deal with a lot of students' use of AI. And in my university, the challenge we're having is we're not quite clear where to draw the line. So I'll give you an example. I gave an essay question out. And what I did, because I use ChatGPT quite often, what I did is I put the question through ChatGPT and had 5 different versions. And so every time I get an essay, I literally say, that paragraph's AI. That, so I can see students who have used 50%, before we talk about Turnitin, just generating the same essay question that I've developed. I can see students who have used it unnecessarily heavily. That helps me from a teacher's perspective. And I think when we talk about the benefits of AI, we have to think about it first from the benefits of, or from the perspective of the tutor, us, and also from the perspectives of the students. From a tutor's perspective, obviously, it's useful in terms of assessments, like I've just given you the example, but I think it's particularly useful in actually designing interactive learning. That's been my experience. And I'll explain this. All academic studies are not the same. The objectives are often different. For example, in law, we don't only want to impact knowledge, we also want to develop skills. So for example, I want my law students to be able to go into a commercial negotiation setting and adequately represent their client. But I cannot simulate a client. Do you understand? So I can use ChatGPT to create a conversation. And I can just say to the students, respond as though this ChatGPT is the client. That simulation is not possible any other way. What we do now is we bring in, let's say we bring in a lawyer who can come and sit in a moot court, what we call moot court, and we can try and simulate a real court situation. But even then, it's not, you can't tweak it as best as you want to. So in terms of learning and teaching and learning, I can, from the beginning, I can set out what the objectives for the students should be, and I can program that into the AI instruction, and I can develop entire learning materials out of that. So from a teacher's perspective, that has been the biggest benefit, is I can design assessments, I can design learning materials, particularly tailored to the skills I want to develop, if I know how to use it. That's one of the big advantages that I've seen. Obviously, there's the issue about academic integrity. A few months ago, I sent out.
We're coming to that.
Yes, a few months ago, I created this writing essay competition for Nigerian law students in Nigeria. Just something I do on the side. And I was really struggling to assess all the papers. I have to be honest, I was really struggling to assess all the papers. So what I did is I engaged ChatGPT in a way that I fed it all the instructions, all the rubrics, all the marking criteria, and I just put the essay through. And to be fair, I did read a few, and then I compared the assessment that I gave to the assessment that ChatGPT gave, and I was outstanding. I was like, oh, this is really good. So in terms of efficiency, that saved me time, because I didn't have 2 days to put into marking these things I'm not being paid for. So that was useful in the sense that I could still deliver the value that I wanted to deliver without necessarily spending the time. So in terms of efficiency, that really helped. But for me, I think the biggest thing is the issue about interactive learning, and also the ability to create learning materials that help my students achieve those things that I want them to achieve. So I'll stop there for now. I think I have a bit more to say, because I'm currently writing a paper, well, doing some research on legal education and AI, and how we can integrate some of these AI tools to especially derive or push them to achieve those capabilities that we want them to learn. Because sometimes we forget that higher education isn't just about learning stuff. If you listen to politics, you hear the Prime Minister saying there's all these Mickey Mouse degrees, and there's this almost this attack on some degrees, and so on higher education. And so we now have to ask ourselves, what's really the value in going to university? Is it just to go and get the degree? Or is it to train myself in thinking, critical thinking, analytical skills? So I think there's more we can do when we dig deeper, not just of I need to pass this knowledge to the students. It's also about, what do I want them to come out as? How do I want them to come through that whole process? I'll stop there for now.
No, thank you. No, that's really helpful. I like the interactive learning, and that's one that, okay, yes, we'll go back and look. Now, your conversation, your responses have taken us into policy, or into the guidance, and it's interesting. So we'll come back to, we can do policy and ethics. And I'm curious to understand from, because most of us are in different schools, you know, how do we strike the balance with using ChatGPT? Is there a policy in your school for students, you know, for lecturers, you know, what is going on? How can we take steps, or how would we ensure that we're using this effectively and ethically, even from a tutor perspective? Is it something you would, is it something you would necessarily, are you upfront about it? Would you tell them that, okay, this has been artificially generated? How will that impact, you know, work and the understanding of why they've come, you know? So I'm just curious to understand guidance that some of you have in place or in schools, and then we'll go into the ethics from a student perspective. Yes, Dr. Kingsley, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me go before Dr. Adeyinka comes in, so then he'll have a lot to say. I think this is a very difficult question to answer. That's why I decided to go first. What I've found in my experience is, obviously I'm relatively young, and I say that I'm comparing myself with some of the academics in my faculty, and a lot of them have been there 20, 30, 40 years. You know, these are people who have been in academia so long that this whole AI thing is just like, what's this thing? And so what I tend to notice is that for those people, their approach to the question of AI is often only thinking about integrity. They're only always thinking about cheating, academic misconduct. And from someone who, you know, I know that it's particularly beneficial, and I've been doing research on technology for a while. So I know that it is useful. And I know obviously there's dark sides. But for these people, octogenarians, as they often like to call their old people, for these people, it's just they're not accessing that topic. So oftentimes when you talk about university policy, you get into this debate. You know, we're still having debates about decolonization, because some people just think the law degree cannot be decolonized. It's black or white, you know. And so for these people, they don't just get it. So when you talk about policy, where do you strike the balance? I would say, actually, the discussion you're trying to make us have is, what are the limits of AI? Because one of the big limits is just the idea that tutors don't have enough information about how to even use it. So it's that problem of, are we even literate enough to be able to create a policy? So the whole page on ChatGPT in my school is about cheating. You know, if you use it this way, you've cheated. If you use it that way, you could go to academic misconduct panel. But that's not all it is. You know, and it takes someone who uses it effectively. I'll give you an example. When I lead a team at the module, and when we finished our entire marking, I put everybody's spreadsheet of marks for the last 3 years. And I thought this would be interesting. I put it through ChatGPT. And I said, find trends. And literally, this thing gave me like 3 pages of interpretation of data. This particular marker tends to mark like this. And you can tell how people actually work. For me, that's useful insight as the module leader. I can say, actually, I think you're a bit too generous, or maybe you need to consider. So for me, that's very useful. But when you think about AI policy and you only look at it from the perspective of integrity, you run into the problem of, we're not doing enough. So I'll throw the question now back to Dr. Adeyinka, because I know he has so much to say.
Thank you. Yes, please. No, this is really interesting. I like that. The limits, very key. Yes, Dr. Adeyinka, over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Genevieve. Thanks, Kingsley, for that very, very insightful contribution you've just made. I always jokingly call this question the clash of the AIs. Remember, academic integrity is also AI. So it's AI versus AI in a way. So the question is, who is going to carry the day? And I also love the perspective you've brought, in that the tendency to always consider the use of AI, in this case, generative AI tools in academia, tends to always come from a narrow perspective of academic integrity. But more importantly is to note that it's because it's the foundation of our education, right? It's the reason why we are here. We want to be sure that you truly are the author, you are the owner, the custodian of the insights that has earned you a degree qualification. It's not been manufactured by anybody else. It's not somebody else's work. We acknowledge you use other people's knowledge. We acknowledge you're not the sole custodian of knowledge, and you've leveraged the insights and the previous works of other people, but those have been duly acknowledged whilst creating your own piece of sort of magic out of what you've seen. And that's really very important. And I think from that generation's point of view, that becomes the heart and soul of sort of why we are here. Now, in terms of policy, like I was saying earlier, my university, like most universities, struggled with how to navigate this. There is no exhaustive policy as at yet. And I give an example of this. Currently, Kingsley mentioned the AI detection softwares that are out there, but they've been tested not to be accurate. In fact, OpenAI themselves had their own AI detection bot, which they've had to pull down because it's had very low levels of accuracy. The implication of that is that detection of AI written material is error prone. So we have false positives or false negatives. And what that then means is that it's almost impossible for us to assume that we can wholeheartedly detect if something has been purely written by AI or not. And where does that leave us? Takes us back to the integrity issue. And how do we then police the work that students are doing in this regard? How are we able to then safeguard the fact that what people have submitted is their authentic and original work? And I share with you something interesting that happened in my university. A couple of colleagues in the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences, they did a study. And they highlighted the difficulty of detecting sort of AI generated work. And what they did was they mixed like 100% AI written submissions with student exam scripts that were due for marking on 5 undergraduate modules across all years of study. So it was a broad range study on their BSc degree in psychology. And they found that 94% of AI submissions were undetected. Number one, 94%. Now, the grades awarded to AI submissions, interestingly, were on the average half a grade boundary higher than those achieved by real students. Another very interesting and important finding. So the chances that, if it is done by AI, it enhances your grade here is proven. But more importantly, is that across all modules, there was an 83.4% chance that the AI submission on a module would outperform a random selection of the same number of real student submissions. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a space where we have to then begin to think very carefully about some of the legal and ethical implications of this very important tool. So that's me just tiptoeing on the dark side a little bit. So let me bring us back into the light, so to say, on what we have. Like I said, the policies at the moment are not exhaustive. And what that means is that what a lot of universities have been able to provide are two things. Now, a lot of universities have sat previously at the very onset of this whole debacle. There was almost like you could see three categories of universities in their responses to the issue. Universities like Imperial and some other universities were very open. So you can almost see this quote liberal embracing of the use of AI tools. And you had the very, very traditional, we resist AI, or we don't even know what to do about it. We don't know what to do with it, and we push it out. And then you had those who were sitting on the fence, not quite sure of what to do. What I have noticed is that there is now an increasing sort of move towards the fact that, number one, it's here to stay. Number two, deployment in different fields of study varies. What Kingsley describes in his application in law, if I brought in my application from psychology and clinical language studies, it has a separate sort of powerful usage. If I come into my own field in business and management, it has its own pros and cons. So we now begin to see that the diversity of the expectations of different schools of thought and different fields of knowledge also creates sort of a complexity in terms of how to police it successfully, because what you are trying to police in one school is actually perfectly legal in another school. So that creates that complexity. So what my university did, that's University of Reading, what we did was to do a few things. Number one was that we tried to create a unified sort of framework to guide both students and teachers on what we will call this permissive use of AI, particularly when it comes to assessment. So we had 3 categories we created. That was why I was speaking my sort of coded language earlier about category 1, 2, and 3. What we had as category 1 is just that gates may not be used at all for in-person exams, vivas, online tests, practicals, and summative role plays. You don't use those at all. So you never use generative AI for those. Category 2 is like you can use it to support student learning, generating ideas. You can use it in your seminars to actually get students to generate initial ideas, to get them off the writer's block, to get them to understand their language, the use of language, to help students improve their work. It's also possible to do that. So we call that category 2 usage. And category 3 usage is actually using Gate effectively to help students develop their skills in the use of the AI tool itself, and understand how that tool can be used and how it can be incorporated into authentic writing task. Now, that takes me into the next sort of one or two more points, and I'll hand over. You see, one of the things that became the first line of attack against AI, or line of defense, maybe let me use the word defense, not attack. Defense for most institutions was to say, "Oi, switch to authentic assessments." And the authentic assessment thing then garnered a lot of weight. What's authentic assessment? Authentic assessments are pretty much assessments that simulate real world scenarios. Now, you just had Kingsley say that what you quote categorized as an authentic assessment was actually done using AI, or AI participated in the process. In business and management, when we talk about authentic assessment, we're probably talking about creating a real life scenario where the application of knowledge is in depth beyond the superficiality that you may have from just merely knowing a particular concept. But now we know also that depending on the level of sophistication of your use of AI tools, you could generate sufficiently powerful answers to deal with even applied scenarios and applied situations. And so all of a sudden, as at last week, the information flowing to us is that AI tools are no longer, authentic assessments are no longer AI safe. So what we had as a line of defense, quote, has been breached. And so what's the next level? The next layer of protection or policy, as it were, is to have this discourse around, number one, academic integrity. What is it exactly? But more importantly is that the university was suggesting to students that if you were to use AI responsibly, responsible use of AI would imply that you are explicit in mentioning how you have used it and what you have done with it. And actually, some of the very popular referencing platforms now have a system of referencing AI usage, so that you are able to do your due diligence and present the fact that you've used AI successfully, or you've used it in a particular way. So that then leaves us in a sort of quagmire, as it were, whereby we embrace it, but at the same time we know it's still a very thorny situation, and a lot of students are asking still the very fundamental question: what will be the permissive use of AI, and how do I get away with it? In cases where we've had suspected use of AI, what we've had to do is to set up mini vivas. It's complicating the work. We set up mini vivas, we bring students in, and we almost like put a line of questioning to them to check what they really know about the course. Now, does that provide 100% proof? It still doesn't. But what it does is that we're now beginning to acknowledge the fact that it's a hydra-headed scenario. We want honesty and integrity in how we use it. We want people to be open to talk about how they've used it. But as a wise man once told me, he said, one of the ways to dissuade a child from misusing or abusing something is to make it readily available in the home. And that if you legalize something, at times, legalization would often reduce the chances that that thing is abused sometimes. And I mark those words. And I guess that's where we're going, where we now need to be more open about how AI can be used and in what context it is not permitted to be used, which was why those categories 1, 2, and 3 sort of made sense, but it's still not complete foolproof of the situation.
No, I like the categories, and I think schools should also borrow those categories as we understand. And I believe that even universities and different schools would have different frameworks for how we can navigate this, because yes, in the different disciplines, you might use them differently. Okay, thank you, Dr. Adeyinka, thank you, Dr. Kingsley. Now we're still on this, Dr. Emmanuel, I've come to you. We are still on this. What are your thoughts regarding the ethical challenges and how students use it, and how we can ensure that students can employ it ethically and still maintain, some sort of originality?
Okay, thank you for the question. This just a bit of history. I remember when I was doing my JAMB then, we were told not to use calculator. You need to really do everything like, yes, you have this 4-figure table. Now, some of you should remember this 4-figure table, you need to take it along with you to do WAEC. And now, who even cares about 4-figure table? Bye. Think about COVID. When COVID came, like, everybody was just running around like, get less chicken. Oh, we need to start doing this and doing that. Now we have generative AI, blah, blah, blah. Everybody is running around. So I think that is what we need to think about. This is new for us, and everybody is scrambling to find a way around it. But I would just want to throw this to the conversation as well. When we talk about students, we think we are just in the UK and we have the perfect students. Spare some thought from some of your colleagues teaching in Unilag. What do you think they will be thinking about? So while we're having this conversation, we might be thinking, yes, we're in the UK, we have our own students, but I think we should also be very mindful about the global context of this conversation. So I will encourage my students to use AI. Yes, though the university at Keele have not come up with an official policy about this and that, but this is something that it's out there, and it's important for students to therefore use it ethically. I think that is the key word I want to throw in here. It's so surprising to see grades and marking, and I could see evidence of ChatGPT when you copy it and it still has this box. I was like, this guy is so stupid, you could not even format it and paste in text. So again, this is where I know you are using it, but you are physically telling Emmanuel, yes, I'm using it. So this is where we also want to recognize some of these students are not smart. They just think, oh, it's there. They think we are small boys coming from one village. We don't know how to pick up things. So I think the students need to know that, yes, it's out there, but they should use it ethically in terms of taking control. So you want to be mindful of, where are you placing? Are you placing it before your work, or you're placing it after your work? That's number one. Number two, you want to check your university's regulation. You might think Keele doesn't have it, Reading doesn't have it. Well, God helps you, Hertfordshire has it. And that is what will really come out to catch you. So that's number two. Number one, know where to put it. Number two, check your university. And number three, check yourself to know you can pick up what ChatGPT or any generative AI is telling you. Because you might think, oh, let me just have done this work. And by the time this generative AI will remix the thing for you, it's like, no, Emmanuel, this is not the way I write. No, I have to change it. So that is because you know yourself, you know the way you write, you know the way you want to communicate, and therefore you are using this technology to complement it. And number four, be very open-minded. Don't just rely on ChatGPT. Be very versatile. There are other technology, there are other tools out there that can enhance your own work, which I will always recognize and also tell students to use. And lastly, declare it if you are being asked to. Yeah, because they will, in some, even for journals now, like, yes, I have to tell them, you know what, I've used this, I've used that. So very soon it will start getting to that case whereby university is asking you. They are not penalizing you, they just want to tell you to hands off. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, I used it. So be truthful, because that is what ethics is all about. Make sure you do the right thing. This technology is there for us to use, but make sure you do it, you use it rightly. And be smart about it. So don't just start flaunting your ignorance and let people know that, yes, you don't know how to use this new technology in town. That is when you get burnt by the fire. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel.
Genevieve, can I just jump into that?
Yes, absolutely.
Emmanuel has raised some very, very interesting points, and I wanted to hop on. I remember that I was listening to a conversation about AI a few months ago, and one of the guy who was speaking the guy who was being interviewed was one of the key people who were designing some of these systems. And the focus of the conversation was whether AI will replace our jobs. And he made one comment that I think has stayed with me. He said, AI will not necessarily replace your jobs. It'll be the people who know how to use AI that will actually replace your jobs. And so the point I want to make, with just to complement what Emmanuel said, is the AI tool itself is an assistant. It's not supposed to drive your academic journey. It's supposed to assist. And the way I think about it is, imagine if I had a secretary and I was typing out work and I wanted to ask some questions of my work. I would ask my secretary, what do you think? That's what the AI system should be. I think that's the responsible use. Obviously, students should know that you can't let the AI do the work for you. You can work alongside with the AI, but it's primarily your work, and the AI only assists. And I think this is the thing: students think that academics don't have an idea of the technology, so they, like Emmanuel said, they just put the full thing. They don't even format it. And I think another important point to make is, we as academics also, because we're almost like we're almost policing how students use these technologies. We need to know how these technologies actually work. One of the guys on my team, who, bless him, he's quite old and he's been there so long, he doesn't really understand. And we talk about a student's paper, and he said the student kept referencing this source, and I said, that's hallucination. And AI does this. And you know what this means? Is the AI can write the essay, include references, but those references are fake. But it will write it perfectly. And he kept saying to me, these references, I can't find it. I said, that's AI. Because the student has just copied and pasted and not checked. And so if, for example, as an academic, I don't know that AI has limitations, then how would I know to actually investigate whether another student has used AI? So the point I'm making here is, in addition to learning all the benefits of AI, we need to make sure that our students, and I totally agree with Manuel, we need to make sure that our students are actually having meaningful interactions with these technologies. That's the point. What do we mean by meaningful interactions? It's not just copying and pasting. It is, how are you using it in a way that you are benefiting as a person? And I think Dr. Adeyinka mentioned this earlier. If you want, ground level knowledge about a subject, then that's useful. In that sense, it would be useful. My view would be, and I say this to my colleagues at work, my view would be that to have to maybe incorporate some elements of AI in my teaching. A good example of this would be, for example, I'm really struggling with my students at level 2 to teach them what it means to be critical, critical analysis, critical evaluation. What does it mean? They always say, Kingsley, what's this critical evaluation? And it's okay, well, let's do it in practice. Let's put something on ChatGPT. Let's put an article on ChatGPT and say, be critical, or generate a critical paragraph. That way the students can learn a skill. So this is my point, is that we can actually teach the students some key skills using these AI. And then we can hopefully try and police them when they write those essays and stuff. And maybe one more point before I go. Just when we're having a departmental meeting recently, we're talking about designing assessments that actually are AI proof. And I said, well, I'll have an essay. They said, well, essays are easy to cheat. So now we need to think about what kind of assessments can we have. And I think Dr. Adeyinka mentioned this. Sometimes assessments like, I'll give an example, audio-visual presentation or a poster. At least it's not going to be directly used, but at least you can design programs that try and eliminate, or if possible, reduce how much AI can be used. So I think those are some of the kind of things we can think about in terms of policy, so that we can have a somewhat standardized approach. But the first thing to say, and I think Dr. Adeyinka said this, is we have to realize that different areas of study have different peculiarities. So maybe what we should be doing is designing policies in terms of areas of study, So, for example, all the law departments in the country can come up with a set of policies. All those who do business come up with a set of policies, etc. Just wanted to add that to what Dr. Emmanuel said.
Yeah, thank you. No, this is great. Thank you. Great conversation so far. And if you're just joining us, go and watch the replay. But do please put your questions in the chat. And as we've been talking, it's reminded me of actually why this came up, because we got lots of essays from students and they had literally copied without changing anything. And I'm standing like this, like, sorry, no, you can't do that. How am I supposed to help you? But then I do remember I did my research on digital technologies and the changes in journalism. And we had this conversation, you know, in my research about, oh, the journalists are gone, you know, digital technologies are here to take over journalism. Actually, people thought newspapers were dead, like some form of every form of newspapers. But what I found and what the research is saying is that what it's creating are now hybrid forms of journalists. We're now getting better. It's creating a different skill set where you were a copywriter, we had people doing different tasks, but now you can do that task yourself and you understand how to do it because of these digital technologies. Now, as tutors, we've looked at policy. We've looked at how we can use it for ideation. We've looked at how we can use it for structuring. We've looked at how you can use it ethically. In considering this, let's also look at employability. Remember, these people are still going to go out into the world to work, hopefully with what we've taught them. Are we doing enough? And how can we then ensure that they have the skills and the competencies that they need to work outside if we are not policing it or over-policing it or not even considering the competencies that are needed? So now my question to all of you is, what are the competencies, skills, and what kind of graduates are we now producing, and what can we do differently? So who wants to pick this up? Don't rush, like.
Dr. Adeyinka should start.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for throwing me under the bus. So that's a very powerful question. And the notion of what kind of what quality of graduates are we nurturing, or are we creating, is a very important one. So recently I was looking at the new skills tree that was developed by the World Economic Forum. And I don't have it before me at the moment, but one of the components of it was the digital literacy component. And this is now, you know, interestingly also is the evolution of our definition of some terms. In the year 2000, 1998, 1999, 2000, if you said you had digital literacy in that Y2K sort of setup, your definition of digital literacy was Microsoft Office literacy plus ability to log into an email and be able to send an email successfully. And if you are so good, you can also make some couple of random attachments. And if you're super sophisticated, you know how to use Dropbox to send heavy files to people across the continent. And that makes you like super attractive to employers. Of course, you and I know that that is no longer the case. So what does digital literacy mean in our time? Well, I guess it is with the evolution of some of these tools that now sort of typify or make our societies increasingly complex. And it's no longer just the ability to use them, but this is going to, you'll find it shocking, everyone on the call. It is actually who you are in relation to those things. That's really what employers are now looking for. So interestingly, the notion of literacy isn't anymore about your ability to use ChatGPT, but your ability to show your own originality in spite and despite of it. So we say, ChatGPT has generated this. So what makes you different? Why should we employ you and not employ ChatGPT in, you know, in this sort of notion? I'll tell you something that happened. So I was doing some work recently with a very senior figure in one of the biggest, you know, technology organizations in the world. And he he happened to be a student on one of my modules, and he's doing a very interesting piece of research. And he came to me to talk to me about the fact that they deployed, so this company, its country of origin is in somewhere in Asia. And of course, it's a global conglomerate, so it has its presence in almost every country of the earth. But he said something that was quite profound, that he had pushed for an agenda through the CTO, his next in line to the Chief Technology Officer, for them to deploy their own in-house Gen AI tool within the organization. And what that meant was that they backed it up and they deployed in the UK. So he oversees the UK team and the HQ team. And he says they deployed it across the HQ and of course in the UK here. And he said all of a sudden, now he's been in this organization for north of 15 years in terms of experience. And then he said suddenly he realized that in his 15 years of working in that organization, for the first time, he began to see similarities and patterns of thinking, convergence of ideas, which meant that the AI deployed was actually reducing the creativity of the people that were working in the organization. And it prompted him to ask, what do I do? And I told him, please do a study that understands how people deploy or how people use AI. I would so love to have typologies around people's attitude and disposition towards AI. Now, this is in the real world of work where somebody's innovation and creativity, their individuality has suddenly been reduced to what the ideas AI is generating. And I think one of the powerful comments that have been submitted this afternoon is the AI tool is not meant to substitute your human agency. And when we talk about skills and talk about the quality of graduates we're nurturing or that we're raising, whilst we can support the legal, ethical use of AI in getting assignments done, and I think, again, it's been mentioned, it's not really about getting that job done. It's about who you become after the process. And that is my biggest concern, that a lot of people are too fascinated about wanting to submit the assignment. Maybe it also means that we need to check our assessment models and our reward systems, because what we are rewarding as institutions may need to change for us to adequately get to the heart of this issue. So people submit the essay, they get a distinction, but you put them into an interview and they still can't provide their own original idea on how to get a job done. So for anyone on this call, please hear me out. Whatever you do, learn to use AI. It could even get you a job because it's almost considered a mandatory tool. It's almost like sending an email, being able to engage with ChatGPT. But after all has been said and done, don't forget that you're playing into the hands of an employer where it can be said that there's absolutely no need for you if we can't see your own originality in the midst of this. So the question is, who on earth will you become when this tool is no longer available? Or if this tool is there, what will be your distinguishing factor? What will be your own unique selling point? What is your own individual flair? What is the place for your human agency? I think that becomes the golden question. In a way, it's a rhetorical question, but that becomes the golden question to address the quality of outputs that we put out there. We're not churning out paranoid robots, as we call them. That's what AI does. What we are generating are human beings with blood in their veins, with a heart. And I can't expect AI to make ethical or moral decisions. That moral agency is also something that we can't ignore. I can't expect AI to do certain things for me. So the thing is, what are you relinquishing? What are you laying down? What are you letting go of in the joy of wanting to take on this tool? But at the same time, you are laying down, but it's actually you selling away what makes you a unique person, and that makes you what an organization really wants. Organizations want the human being in you, not anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, who are you becoming? Who are you really becoming? I think as we continue this conversation, we will get people that actually specialize in machine learning, because we want to understand how machine learning, also, we think we are training the machine, but is it also training us? Who are we really becoming? So thank you, Dr. Adeyinka. We have some questions. Please do send your questions. I know I missed one at the beginning, so I'll just take them as we continue.
Please, can I just add something?
Yes,
when we talk about job, I think I saw prompt engineers. Yes.
Uh-huh.
That is one job that they said is going to reign now. Like, yes, able to prompt the AI to give you that exponential insight. Yes. Well, I just thought of dropping that there. Yes.
Okay. So students here, where are some of my students? All right, let's go. Prompt engineering. No, but to be fair, so that's really good, especially in part of my field in marketing. The ability to come up with the right questions, the right prompts. You would see how it can help you with, data analytics, with sales. It does have its pros, and we can talk about the biases. That's another thing with generative AI, the biases, because the AI algorithm can perpetuate some biases in the data that it has been trained on. This is why this conversation is very helpful for African PhD scholars. So the people from a certain part of the world, it's important that we use this, we also start to develop, so that we bridge the gap with any kind of biases that we will find that may come up in these conversations. And you will find that not just in academia, you will find these biases also in religious settings, because there's some things you put, some prompts you will put, and it would, how it will bleep things out. And you're like, no, let's not. So please don't blindly accept AI generated information. Research, verify the sources, compensate and, compare, go to the library, advocate for fairness. If you see potential biases, you can start to correct that. So we do encourage use, also human interaction. So let me go to that question. I just saw, please send the questions. Thank you. Very insightful conversation from Riches. Riches says, do we feel that we should focus on AI adoption or regulation? And what's our take in the future in terms of AI evolution and its impact in enhancing the quality of education in Africa? So I'll just take that again for those that didn't pick that. Do we feel we should focus on adoption or regulation? Good one. What's our take regarding the future in terms of AI evolution and its impact in enhancing the quality of education in Africa? Generated sermons. Oh my goodness. Let's wait. Okay. Let's take Rich's question and we'll come back to that. And yes, it does have a lot of biases. Yes. So what's our take? Should we focus on adoption first? Or can we actually do both? So what do we think? Adoption, regulation.
Let the lawyer go for this.
I see. Okay, the baton. Right. Go
Okay,
ahead.
let me start off on this. The question, first of all, is quite broad, and obviously we're only speaking in the context of higher education, but this question seems to be talking about sort of the bigger issues, and there are lots of bigger issues like privacy, those types of discussions. From a legal standpoint, we can't do both, obviously. We can adopt whilst we implement some guardrails via regulation, where we can ensure that players, and actually when you talk about regulation at this stage, we're not necessarily regulating how people use AI. It's more about people who develop. And it's very targeted regulation. For example, the EU has recently come up with an AI bill, and I think it's still going through the processes of enactment. And actually in that AI bill, what they've done is they've focused more on things like copyright, intellectual property, and making sure that those who create these platforms are setting, they're coding in, they're embedding in some of these ethical considerations in the code, in how they design the software. So they're not necessarily focusing on us who just end users, who just use these products. They're more focused on those who create the product. So in terms of regulation, I would say that's the approach to take. When we talk about that, the question talks about the quality of education in Africa. My view would be that if there's a tool that would help us democratize, I like that word. If there's a tool that would help us democratize, give more people access, then whatever we can do to use that tool, I would say yes. Now, I say this, and I'm coming from a bit of history. Now, when Bitcoin first started, obviously my PhD was in Bitcoin. I was such a huge believer, and I would say, Bitcoin would take over the world, etc. And a few years down the line, I quickly learned that actually it's not entirely the way I thought it would be. So I don't think this will take over in that sense. But we do need to make sure that we use it and harness and leverage some of those benefits. And I really like the way the question focuses on Africa, because we know we have unique issues. And so I think Emmanuel mentioned this earlier. We may talk about our students. We all have access to the internet. I can always just use ChatGPT here to check essays, etc. But if you think about the academic University of Jos, where I went to, who still recycles the course material, for the last 20 years, for students who have no access to e-libraries, then, AI is such a big deal. It's a game changer for them. Although we have to make sure that the AI at this early stages are used properly. So I would say a bit of regulation, but not regulation in the sense of law, but more regulation in terms of those who design academic programs. We need to start to respond in terms of pedagogy. How do we design programs that can help students actually become that person we want them to become? And I think this feeds back into your previous question. Who are we actually churning out? What this assembly line of higher education, who are we sending into the marketplace? The head of law school in Sheffield, Hallam, told us a story a few months ago, that he went to London and went to the top law firms, and he was asking them, what kind of lawyers do you want to recruit? What does that lawyer look like? And some of the responses he got really startled him, because he thought it would be about, the excellent grades and, the confidence in speaking and all that stuff. But he said, no, it's not all about that. It's the person. How can they respond to unique issues? How can they respond? For example, you have a client who is African. How can you respond to that client in a way that the client feels like you're providing them legal service, not robotic service? So it's not just about churning out people who can write or who can use ChatGPT to write excellent essays. It's about the person they become as a result of the 4 years or 3 years in university. Are they critical? Can they analyze? Some of these capabilities are the things we need to look out for. And to answer the question directly in terms of the African context, I think we need to start to think more about how do we design, programs that can do that particular thing. I went to University of Jos, and for the 5 years I was there, I never saw a courtroom. Nobody made it mandatory. So I never knew what law actually, how it worked in practice for 5 years. And here in my first year, students are already dealing with real clients. They've been exposed to stuff already in their first year. And I used to think, goodness, if only I had been exposed to law, proper law, practical law in my first or second year university, I probably would have done better. So the point I'm making is we have to design our entire educational system, has to be designed in a way that produces not just people who can cram, which is why we didn't need calculators for those JAM exams, Emmanuel, but people who can actually use tools and can project themselves and can be original. So that's my attempt at the question. I'll leave it for others. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Dr. Emmanuel?
I would say we need to know who is doing what. Yes, are we, as a user, as regulators, we want to be very mindful of our boundaries. Yes. So I think for now, I'm doing the using and the regulating within my own small space. Yes, but I think what Kingsley is talking about is thinking about the global space. So that's one, as individual, regulating it ourselves. And number two, we want to put the developers on their, how do they say, to put them on their, to make them feel responsible. You can't just be churning these things and we should be accepting it like that. You should be able to have some form of responsibility. And I think they are aware of it. But these tech companies, yes, we don't know what is going on. You don't know what is behind that, within that black box. But I think it's about challenging them to always do right. And ultimately, we leave it to the government, yes, those who we have voted for, to help us to put them in the right place, to ask those difficult questions. And to circle back, I think that is where the academians will come in, academics, or what will I put it, researchers, to raise those difficult questions, to start asking, like, yes, what are we really doing? What are we getting on? How much are we really grabbing? Do we have do we need to switch off this tap, or we should just keep doing it? Or is it just meeting the need of the consumers? They want this, they want this, they want this. How do we really balance the need for generative content and the need for our own human creativity? So lastly, I think I will go back to that idea of Adeyinka's point around assessment. I would love to have Viva for all my students. But when you think about the size of students, that can also be a challenge. But for a small class, which I lead on the master, that's something I've told them to do. Like, yes, do a video recording, 50%. Like, you know what? You can do your writing, but that is 50%. But I still want to see you. I want to hear you talk. I don't need to be there, but do a recording and send it to me as part of your assignment, which has been very helpful. But the only thing is, I wish I could be there to ask them that question, like that's goes, you know what I mean? Like, you give me something, I give you back the question. But at least for now, I'm still able to manage that. But I think in the future, you want students who are able to stand and talk and present their ideas without even having any paper, without reading at any screen. You get in front of a client, you know what to say instantly. You don't need to say, excuse me, let me type it in and find something to tell you. So I think that is the type of student we want to start developing from the university, students who are able to think. And also now, I think there's going to be more demand for human contact, if you know what I mean, whereby I don't want to read a letter from Adeyinka saying, Emmanuel, this is me. I want him to call. No, even call self can be scary now. You don't know if he's the one talking. But I want to see him in flesh in front of me and have a real conversation. So at least this is not a robot talking to me. This is not generative AI using his voice to talk to me. So I think that is the world we are going into, whereby there will be that need for that face-to-face interaction, whereby you can really justify what you have written, what you have typed out, or what you've said previously. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of justifying and enhancing the quality of education in Africa, it needs to be holistic. It's not just about AI. It has to be holistic, from the learners to the tutors, to the policy, to the government. Has to be holistic. I interviewed a potential PhD student, and the PhD proposal was amazing. It was well written. It was well done. Listen, I was looking forward to it.
I know where you're going. The interview, right?
The interview and the proposal did not match. Worlds apart. Listen, worlds apart. It's not on this maybe in the after party, I will give you it was worlds. I couldn't salvage anything from that interview. And this could be as a result of AI. So let's take some more questions. We saw AI evangelism campaigns. Right, okay, so I have a question here. How would you balance the disparity from a student perspective now, if AI can be utilized effectively in certain programs, certain schools, but not others, due, of course, to the nature of the program? So for the law simulations, and let's say a journalism class with a business degree, would you then deem that fair? And that's a good question, because we always get this, especially determined, sometimes with assessment. So would you deem that fair? Right. Let's see.
Okay, so I can take this. I think it's a fantastic question. So let's put it this way. In a simple, let me simplify the perspective, even though you understand that it's a very complex issue. There is always going to be a positive use case of AI in every program. The impact of each positive use case could then vary. So when you talk about fairness, I think, therefore, the fairness should not be on the basis of the positive use case possibilities on each of those programs. However, on how the blanket systemic framework that guides the use of AI within specific institutions regulates, again, that word regulates, but allows for how AI is used. And what that does is that it creates a bit of latitude. It creates a bit of freedom. When you use the AI in the way, say, Kingsley described it earlier in the context of law, can we reasonably suggest that it is producing more sophisticated graduates than, say, someone else in business and management who hasn't done exactly that same kind of thing, but maybe has also done some client interfacing conversations? Interestingly also is that there are softwares and there are so many platforms that create business simulation cases where people actually go into the field through these softwares. They're not necessarily they're also AI powered in slightly different ways, and you can sort of pick up a client profile, a customer profile. You can engage with them. It creates these options of engagement, and you then have this very enriching sort of notion. And we've had colleagues who have deployed those sorts of tools within their within their own assessment frameworks. We've had people deploy the headsets, the 3D headsets on business and management modules. So what I'm saying in my response to that is that the notion of fairness will be galvanized by, in a way, the guidance that is available. We'll not talk about fairness if only we think that there is a conferred advantage to a particular program deploying AI tools more than other programs. And that's exactly the heart and soul of our conversation so far, that even though in written assessments, it has proven that having AI-generated written assessments could confer some kind of advantage. But in other instances where it is used as a part of a teaching practice, we haven't yet had studies that can tell us whether the use of AI as an embodied tool for teaching practice necessarily produce superior quality graduates to others. And on that basis, it may be a difficult one to answer. But my response to you is just simply on that point, that every single program has a positive use case for AI, and a valid one for that matter. And it still cannot be enforced on people. It still has to provide, there has to still be a latitude for colleagues, for academics, for teachers to be comfortable to take it on. One final word here is also that in our conversations on AI, we often just assume that it is accessible. It isn't always accessible to everybody. To use ChatGPT, it's free. It's a freemium model, right? There are some other models of it that if you want to get the better sophisticated stuff, you need to pay $60 to access it in a year. How many students will pay $60 to access an AI tool for a year? Even when you're talking about virtual reality headsets, the university has to invest heavily in providing virtual reality headsets. So I'm going back to say that there are still some underlying serious financial implications to some of these decisions, that the notion of fairness itself then becomes a broader, complicated issue. But I just wanted to narrow it down a bit to sort of provide a bit of response to that question, and I hope that answers that.
Yes, thank you. No, that's very helpful. And I think it's helpful that we can come back to these at a later point so that we can also talk about the equity and equality that AI can bring to certain disciplines. So thank you for that. There's another question. Relation to moral and ethical decisions, you mentioned that AI cannot make ethical decisions, but she has encountered otherwise using ChatGPT to generate images. She has prompted for an image to be generated, and it would not generate that image. And the response from ChatGPT was, "This goes against its moral ethics." Does this mean that the two can actually make ethical decisions? And this is very interesting. So this goes against its moral ethics. Machine learning. Who programmed the moral ethics and the biases that it comes up with, and how do we deal with those? Wonderful. Okay.
I could take a stab at that, and then I'll hand over to Kingsley and Emmanuel, whom I'm sure will also have a few more things to take. So when we're talking about machine learning, and back to that question on that's what ChatGPT told you about a generated image. So now, I think Kingsley's point there summarizes that in a very, gives that response to it. So we know that by law, there are certain ethical obligations that have now been put upon these organizations to make sure that to provide a bit of a moral safeguard around the use of AI. Now, the point I was making about the fact that AI cannot make an ethical decision is that, again, with ethical decisions, I'm an ethicist by training, and we have what we call moral intensity. There are yes, no, right, wrong answers that you can feed into an AI platform to help you make simple responses. There are category 2 levels of intensity where you can have if so, then sort of scenarios where you program if it is this, then that. If it is this, then that. That provides another sort of layer. So in that way, I could call that secondary ethical considerations, and you can program it. Remember, everything you tell AI to judge is on the basis of a human's moral framework. And that takes us into the notion of machine learning. Now, a few years ago, not too long ago, if you put in 3 black men into Google, what you will find are prison images of black men that shows up on Google Images. And if you put a white family, what you see is a very glowing picture of a family that is always smiling and everything is always looking good, and so on and so forth. And Google was called out for that. And that was where we began to see one of the very terrible consequences of algorithmic bias, which is where the whole regulation now comes in, that no matter how much you feed or you do machine learning, there will always be algorithmic bias. Your platform projects your biases as much as it projects your very well-established foundations of knowledge. And so again, quote and unquote, this is also where human agency becomes important, where according to some of the work I did at my own sort of PhD level, when I was looking at things like how can organizations make good people do bad things, one of the most important findings from that study is that what essentially makes you a human being is your capacity to operate as a critical, independent, moral agent. We call it moral autonomy, your ability to make up your own mind yourself. AI does not have that capacity. If at best what it does is that it aggregates what different people think and tries to present that in its own framework as best as it can. And so, yes, it can help with minor level, yes, no, if then so sort of scenarios. But when you're getting into more complex issues, so let me give an example to that question now. If you go on ChatGPT now and type, comment on the current Israel-Palestine war. Now we are getting into deep territories. Do you think ChatGPT will tell you how to navigate the policy implication for supplying weapons to Israel as opposed to supplying those weapon regulations? So now you see where I'm going. So you can't, at that level of intensity, it is near impossible. It might proffer something to you, but know that whatever you're getting is someone's propaganda. So the question is, what are you going to do about it as a human being?
Thank you. Wow, the biases. Yes, thank you. No, that's really good. And that's where, when I talked about the religious thing, where if you put it, it bleeps out certain words, it doesn't give you things. And if you're one that does not study certain books for yourself, you would not know exactly that it is wrong. So it's important that we understand. And we also, let's use this to call people to also go into the field of machine learning and artificial intelligence, so that it's not, we have the right people there that can support and also put forward our own agenda, whatever the agenda might be. If you can put your questions in the chat, we can take some more questions, please. And yes, I see your hand. I see your hand. Why is your hand yellow, by the way? This is bias. Your hand should be. Yeah, it should be.
Oh dear Lord. That's the program of Zoom. So maybe I should have programmed it to be brown, but this is a bias again. We're talking about bias.
Exactly. Why is your hand yellow?
I just wanted to, I think Dr. Adeyinka has answered that question. I just wanted to add one more thing. Recently, the last few weeks, the UK Parliament, before they went on the end of their session, the UK Parliament was considering a bill for protecting kids, especially kids on the internet. And this has been an ongoing debate for the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years, where we obviously have seen that kids are exposed to unnecessary risks on the internet, addictions, etc. And so the reason why these social media platforms, for example, are now being forced to make sure that they regulate the content that goes onto the feeds, timelines of kids, is because of the societal reaction. So again, the reason why ChatGPT will tell you that it goes against its moral code, if it has a moral code, is because somebody has programmed that moral code in. And just like Dr. Adeyinka was saying, there's obviously it's a spectrum, and we can't all agree on which morality should be the right morality, because my moral standards may be different from yours. But there's some general things that we agree with. For example, if you ask ChatGPT to generate a picture, a bloody picture, for example, or if you ask it to create a caricature of a politician, it will likely tell you that it can't do it, because we've actually now said we don't want people to use ChatGPT to caricature politicians or to spread fake news. So it's society responding to some of these problems. That's why these types of discussions are important, where we can then regulate alongside adopt. So it goes back to answering the previous question. So I just wanted to add that to what Dr. Adeyinka said.
Thank you. No, this is very good. Thank you. Please let us know if you have further questions. And it is clear that we're going to have to continue these conversations because we want to understand a bit more. We might not enter research today, how does artificial intelligence, enhance research, because that will take us down collaboration, that will take us down, another minefield. But I just picked up something here. Thank you, Tess. Hello, she's in the house. You agree with the last speaker, Nigerian education needs an overhaul. Yes, but you don't know if AI will help with molding academics who can provide analytical and critical research. And we're looking at the current crop of academics that we have, but we believe that we are raising some more. And this is why we've been trying to foster more collaboration with people that are actually based in Africa, and even the name. So why this has this name is we're all from African descent, and we're trying to steer the conversation so that we can give back, so that we can focus, so that we can enhance what is happening back home. But we do hope that we can produce more academics that have analytical and critical research. And I see your hand, yes, as we draw closely to, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So thanks, Dr. Genevieve. I think I just wanted to make a quick remark on the whole AI enhancing education in Africa. I think it's a very important point because, again, I come from the perspective where I do a lot of work with tech entrepreneurs in the space, and I'm sort of in touch with the evolution of the tech ecosystem in most of our countries in Africa. Also bearing in mind that internet penetration is on the increase. What does that tell us? It tells us that, again, as we've been saying all day, that the AI tool is suddenly something that is accessible to a young person on their smartphone. Let's not talk about school context first. Let's bring it outside of the school context. Knowledge is now decentralized. People have access to knowledge, and they have access to knowledge at such a rate that is just simply incredible. And so within the education realms, I agree a complete overhaul is needed. We have a country like Kenya that has either made a full-blown switch to a skills-based curriculum, which I think is an interesting switch. If you're interested in that, you can have a look at it on what the skills-based curriculum is and how they're shifting an entire national educational system to a skills-based approach, which I think is one of the things that we should absolutely be looking at. How do we prepare our people, our children, young people for the jobs of the future? So if you look at the way the global landscape is heading, and we see that the median age in Africa is 19, and that 50% of the global workforce will be coming out of Africa, and we look at the caliber of jobs that are being generated globally, etc., it raises a big bowl of questions for us in terms of how do we navigate. So number one, it's available. A lot of young people have access to AI tools. I mean, in my class, for example, when I'm teaching them in Nigeria, Lagos, in Ghana, in Togo, everywhere, they always have these things in front of them, and they can actually use them in class to generate ideas and generate knowledge, and it's available. Now, in our tertiary systems, we have a problem. The problem is, when I was doing my own undergrad in Lagos, we plagiarized without remorse. I know that there are systems and tools that are used now to sort of help in plagiarism detection at the university level. However that is working, I don't know how effective they are. But the level of sophistication of AI detection, as we've suggested so far, means that it's almost impossible to also detect AI use. And so in a Nigerian setup or in an African setup, it then means that a lot has to be done to create, that whole, holistic approach to how we navigate it together. So lecturers themselves, I'm sorry to say, are lazy in many ways, that they will rather use the AI to set exam questions. They want to use AI to do the marking. So everything then becomes, everything starts to get out of control, starts to get out of hand. So can it enhance education? Yes, it can. In fact, we must allow it to enhance education because of the way the global trend is, and amongst other things that are happening. But I worry that in a continent like Africa, where regulation for these things will be very poor, very slow, and will not be able to catch up quite quickly, we have the tendency that it will be abused. And once it is abused, then we're starting to have another further doubt of what we're actually on about. It is a very complicated one, but I just thought I add that to it, that it is an interesting question worth also looking into in greater detail.
Thank you. No, thank you. There's more. That's all I can see. There's more. This conversation has just started, only just started. So we would just slightly, okay, Peter, yes, go ahead with your question. Do you want to unmute, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. It's not really a question, just to say it's been an interesting conversation here. So insightful and so enriching. And I think from my perspective as a student, I would simply say, I want to be like those speakers who have spoken here, who can provide a critical and analytical perspective on issues. And I think AI cannot do that for me. I just only wish that this kind of forum should be made available maybe at our universities where a lot of students are involved so that they can learn. Because if you aggregate all the views we have gathered here, you agree with me, as I said earlier in my initial message, that it is an ongoing conversation. And so it's very important, and I've learned so much. Diverse views, up and downs of the AI is so interesting. And I think one word I will say, and a takeaway for me, and I would like some other students to learn from it, is that we need human intelligence to utilize artificial intelligence tools. And so if we allow AI to think for us, then there is no need of us. That should be the takeaway.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for organizing this session. It's been enriching.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. That's really lovely to hear. And you see, one thing is you invite the students and they don't turn up, and it's like the resources are there, but where are they? So that's also another thing, but hopefully, we will get there. Thank you, Peter. I see a question from Vivian. Good one. How can we encourage students to have a balance on AI and individual research? Because yes, there is a high reliance on AI only. We have seen a lot of AI generated works with individuals with AI having more grades than individuals with moderate use of AI as stated. Okay, so there's a speculation there. You saying that people with AI get more grades than people that use it moderately? Please just clarify, but I'll take the first one where you said, how can we encourage students to have a balance, a good balance, a healthy balance with individual research and AI? And Dr. Emmanuel, you mentioned that earlier. How can we ensure that students have this balance? First of all, let them come and listen. That's number one. And then we can get them. So would you want to take this one?
Yes, I guess we have talked about it during this conversation, but I would like to remind the student that while this technology is there, you want to take responsibility for what you are putting in and also for what is coming out. So the point is, you are not just saying, do this for me. At least have something that you are imputing. And then when it comes out, you should be able to reflect and make sure this is saying what you can say in presence of your lecturer. So don't just use what this thing is giving you, think, yes, I want to pass. God help you, they will invite you for a mini viva. Yes. And then you have to defend this. So while you want to use it, I won't stop you from using it, but you have to be strategic. You have to be very mindful. And also you want to still take charge and be responsible for what you are bringing in and also for what you are submitting as part of its output. Yes, so that would be my short answer. I have the long one, but because of time, that's just a short version.
Thank you. Thank you so
welcome.
much, Dr. Emmanuel. Dr. Kingsley.
I wonder if you noticed that I've changed the color of the emoji.
Yes, well,
So that answers my, actually, I want to use that to answer the question. You've got to be open to learning, open to adjusting. And I think it's important to understand what I mean by this. If you realize that the AI itself is trained on already existing data, except machine learning, which sort of it does itself, but mostly AI is trained on existing data. And what Dr. Adeyinka said earlier is you need to be authentic, you need to be original. And you cannot have your original input if you only consider what's in that box, that black box. Sometimes you need to step outside the black box so you can be original. So to encourage you in how to balance, I would say, of course, you can use the AI to generate some ideas and to start off the discussion, but you need to go further. You need to be reflective. You need to think about what the AI has told you. You need to actually understand and then sort of critique it. This is what I talked about earlier when I talked about having meaningful interactions with the AI system. If you just simply copy and paste, then you're not really learning anything from the use of AI. So if, for example, you're trying to write an essay and you ask the AI to generate you, let's say, an outline, for example, you need to be able to interrogate whether that outline helps you answer the question that you want to answer. You need to be able to go further than what the AI is actually telling you to do. So you need to look behind the AI almost and try and figure out how to go about it. So that would be my answer in terms of how to balance. And just to almost further emphasize what Emmanuel said, you need to take responsibility. The way I always describe this is to say that actually students should be driving their learning. So even the fact that you have a lecturer in the classroom doesn't mean that you lose all responsibility for your own learning. So you need to take responsibility for your own learning, because it's not just about getting a 95 on an essay. It's about learning the skills that the essay was trained or was expected to help you develop. So coming out of that whole process, being a better person, I would say, once you have that as the focus, then you always go beyond the AI. The AI is just a tool, and it shouldn't become the entire thing. So that's my short and long answer. And
short and long answers. Thank you. That's very helpful. Tess, I see your hand, and this will be the last we'll take for today. Would you like to go?
Oh, hi, Dr. Bosah. It was a lovely, lively conversation. Sorry, I joined in a little late. Kind of in the middle of my own thesis right now. So what I'm worried about is, like you pointed out, very few people joined in. This is 35 people. I'm worried that we're not reaching as many people as we should. I have been singing this song of our curriculum needing an overhaul for years. One of the reasons why all my children are studying in the UK right now, because I felt that we weren't really being in the international education space, as you know. I have visited a lot of schools for a long time now. And I just didn't understand why the disparity still exists, because our leaders visit and they go to these places, they see the differences, they go for short lectures, and then they return home. A lot of us go and study abroad and we return home and nothing gets done. So that is kind of a worry to me. My question here is, how do we get the think tanks, the people in the education system, to stop looking at what's in it for me and start looking at what's going to help the country move forward? How do we do that?
You know, I love that. Thank you, Tess. She's very passionate about, I'm sorry, Doctor, 1 second, but she's very passionate about education. And yes, she's been in the education space, you know, with her partner as well. So yes, and I know, like, where are the people? It's something that we are still working on, contending with. I don't want to talk about the politics. Let me, Dr. Adeyinka, take this one. Why are you smiling?
Thank you so much. I mean, I smiled because it's also an area of passion for me. And in 2017, I was in Philadelphia, and I had been invited. I had bumped into a particular educator on my train from New Jersey to Philly or so. And we got talking. So she happens to be the head of a very interesting school in downtown Philly. So she extended an invitation to me. I was traveling back to London that day. So she asked me whenever I was back in town, I should come back to her. So thankfully, I was back in Wharton in the summer. So I went from my program in Wharton to her school. So she opened up and they gave me a full-blown tour of the school. Now, what I found quite powerful about that experience, and the reason why I'm sharing this with you is it summarizes my answer to you, is that in an institution, in a school that was set up in a particular setup in Philly with the public education system, and it's a public school, they dared to change the narrative and to show what was possible. I'll tell you some of the things they did. Number one, they were adopting a STEAM model instead of a STEM model. So arts was embedded into what they did. They had a very unique system of how students got their credits, but everything geared towards ensuring that they still made up for they made the grades that was needed to proceed onward to university and so on and so forth. Did you know that in that school, entrepreneurship, as much as we love to teach it in a classroom, was actually taught in a different way and was compulsory for everybody? They had a cafe at the bottom of at the ground floor. The cafe had a rota system where almost everybody was given a time they will serve in that cafe. They had different functions. Everybody took on different functions. They roasted coffee. They sold the coffee to neighboring coffee shops, made money from it. And they were creating a system where entrepreneurship, as great as I am an entrepreneurship educator myself, as much as I love to talk about the entrepreneurship theory and practice, what they did was they actually put the students in the heart and soul of it. They did the same thing for their theater. They did the same thing for everything else that they did. So they created an interesting pedagogy powered by a unique curriculum. Now, what am I saying to you? In the Nigerian context, I still believe that it's in as much as we can keep talking about how we change the mindset of stakeholders, key stakeholders, government, etc., etc. One of the most powerful ways I have found you can change the narrative is to become the accepted doctrine. And what that means is find what works, build it into your system. As long as you don't jeopardize the JAMB, WAEC, and all that sort of, what you'll call the staple treats for why you've sent a child to school. But once people begin to see the extra and the kind of quality of students you turn out, the same politicians that would often send their kids abroad will be the first people to patronize you. Now in Nigeria, as you may be aware, one of the leading private institutions here in the UK is building a whole new setup in Nigeria at the cost of God knows how much that's going to cost. Why? Because there's something about the quality of education here that is appealing, and that's why they're going there. But I still think, for me, one of my answers to this notion of changing mindset is to become the accepted doctrine. Show what is possible. Otherwise, describing what is possible doesn't move the eye of the needle, but showing it is actually what makes things work. It's called visible modeling.
Thank you. Thank you. And for me, we'll continue to push the message of hope. One of the reasons for the African PhD Scholars Network is to keep hope alive. We contemplated removing the African so it would be appealing, and I said no. The essence is that we are training, we are sharing so that we can give back in some measure. There will come a time where this that we are doing, who we have become, the children that are coming after us will benefit from these conversations, from these things that we're sharing. And we are hoping and believing, and I would say praying, that we are raising the next or the current generation that will take over and that can actually go in and overhaul. I do have hope that there is a Nigeria that would arise, or an Africa, for those that are not Nigerians, an Africa that would arise, that will rival the West, that will stand, that we can showcase, and that we will be proud of who we are. And we will not just cower. Yes, we are here and we are learning, but we will never forget our roots. We will never forget where we've come from. Everything we are doing now is so that there will be hope for somebody that is back home, and they would see that they can become and they can do things differently. And we know that with time, yes, we may not have the, the numbers will come, the funding will come, the people will come, and we will get there. So for those that are doing their PhD, masters, wherever you're at, know that we are all contributing in a small way. We are all pushing this narrative of hope in the different spheres, where education, there's law, there are different things. We will be the change that would happen, and it will come in this short space of time. Yes, there's always the what's in it for me factor that we are contending with, but hope, we can only keep hope alive. So I would encourage us to continue to keep hope alive, instill this in your siblings, instill this in the children, instill this where you go, and that we know that we would never look down on where we've come from. We want to give back at some point. So hopefully we will do just that.
Can I get in on that? If that's okay. That's a conversation that is very heavy to have in terms of how we actually change the way things are. I think it's a collective effort. I agree with what you both said. In fact, Genevieve, I really agree with what you said. Instead of saying pay back, I would probably say pay forward. And I think we all need to do our bits, even if it is incredibly difficult. In your little corner, do that little bit. One of the things I do, for example, is every year I have an essay competition. And maybe I get 50 submissions. But for those 50, I will give them feedback like I was giving my students here. And they will not get that level of feedback ever in the Nigerian context. But that's my little way of saying, actually, it can be better. And yes, I can complain about how difficult it is, but I can do my little bits. If it's in like having events like this, if it's in writing your articles on the subject, if it's in contributing back to your alma mater, whatever you can find to do, no matter how small, we'll set that light and watch it grow. I think that's how we collectively can move the needle on this issue.
Thank you. That is true. In APSN, we have 3 C's. One of that is community. The second is collaboration. We're working with some universities, like he said, alma mater. I've contacted my alma mater and we're working on things. So we, and then for you here, we have some links. Do support, do join, tell people about what we're doing. If you have ways we can collaborate, we're very happy to collaborate. We have some ongoing conversations with some people in the ministry on how we can collaborate to move these conversations forward. Let us pack the bus here for today, but this is a conversation that has just started. I know there's some people joining us for the first time. We've put the links. Please go back. We've had things on preparing for PhD interview, which we'll have again, because now there's some things that have been updated. We've had this year, you just started your PhD. I know my PhD student is here. I was not even sure what to call it again. Is here. Please go back. We've had the JAPA syndrome. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. And it's still ongoing, but yes, we've had the writers' workshop. And we do have spaces where we encourage people, if you're struggling to write, just stop by, you find somebody writing, stay with the person. If you need accountability, just stop by, stay with the person. If you're still contemplating your PhD, drop us an email. Somebody will be there to reach out. It's a community, it's a network. We're just here to support each other. Thank you for coming today, for listening, for contributing, for asking questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We look forward to, we have one more event next month, and then we are meeting in person in July for the Research Enhancement conference, and you see the usual suspects. They will be there, but it's always an amazing session. There'll be food, there'll be talks, there'll be questions, you know, there's always something. You'll find the keynotes on YouTube. Please go watch the keynote. Dr. Adeyinka gave the keynote last year. Let's extend the invitation for this year. You know. And so you find all of that online. So, but thank you so much. If you do want to be part of the community, there's a link. So please do join the WhatsApp community. We usually send out monthly emails. Some people have been defaulting, but they would repent. Let me just say thank you to Dr. Kingsley for his time. Thank you so much for your time, you know, for the legal aspect, for the responses. It's been amazing. And there's more to come. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel Mogaji, for your time. Yes, somebody pulled him away, so he's in and out. But thank you. It's amazing how this whole network, you know, just it's been actually a network of how we have started. And we're making waves in Ghana and Rwanda. So we're going to have some more faces that you would see. But of course, the usual suspects always there. Thank you, Dr. Adeyinka, for your time as well, for the contributions, you know, for the thought-provoking questions and comments as well. Yes, so the one that we're carrying with us, who are you becoming? Hey, my God. So who are you becoming? Let's carry that. But just as we go, just to recap. So we've had conversations today about AI. We've looked at the impact and opportunities. We've acknowledged the challenges and the ethical considerations. We've also considered some of the future trends that are shaping learning, teaching, and also students. We didn't look at research and collaboration today. We'll go back into that. We'll look at policy, you know, we'll unpack these a bit more. And if you're thinking you're using AI, please remember, use it ethically. There are benefits. There's accessibility. It can personalize your learning. Pay attention to the bias that the potential biases it might throw up. There are also privacy concerns, or privacy, as you know, depending on which received pronunciation you want to use. Look at the concerns and also just understand how well you're using it. So you can also advocate for fairness in the use. Thank you on behalf of the team. They have been here, helpful, posting in the chat. Thank you so much. I think thank you so much to the team. Penel, Orioye, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that has helped share. They've been very helpful, especially students from the University of Hertfordshire. They've really helped to share this. I think I saw Vine. Well done. Solomon is here. Debbie, thank you. John, they've all used their platforms to share. And this is what we say about collaborating and being a network. Until we meet again next time, this is it from me. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.